welcome. This is Seneca Waugh with your Clear Next Step. Thank you so much for being part of this conversation. Today, March 19th, 2020, the topic at hand is communication, right? Communicate more. And you know that if you've known anything about your Clear Next Step and the things that I've been teaching for years, you know that communication is near and dear to my heart. And it's something that we do and as something we talk about and we train and we teach on a lot. But communication in this moment, in a moment of crisis right now, communicating is so important. And so today's message is really communicate more. Communicate more. And what are the things you ought to be communicating? One of the first ones I'm going to invite you to think about is to communicate how you're feeling. Really, what are those thoughts going on? What are the feelings that you're experiencing? I think if you name it, I think if you share it, I think if you talk about it, we'll have the ability to process that information better and move past it or move on. If you're feeling fearful, if you are feeling disrupted, if you are feeling discouraged, if you are feeling afraid, all of these are valid emotions. If you're feeling angry, all of these are valid. I want you to communicate how you're feeling so somebody else knows where you're coming from. If you're feeling unflapped, because at this moment it hasn't gotten to you yet, that's okay too. But I invite you to communicate how you're feeling so that those around you know how you're feeling and can connect with you appropriately. And also to give yourself a chance, if it is a negative emotion, to work through it and get past it. The second thing I want you to communicate is communicate what you're working on. What are you doing? So if you are an employee or a team member and you are collaborating with others and you're used to other people knowing what you're working on, because they can walk right past your desk on their way to the conference room, or they can see what you're working on when they look at you, or you're used to working on things together or side by side. It used to be, as recently as yesterday, it used to be that we knew what the other person was working on right next to us. And now we're not. Now we're distributed and many of us are working from home in a new way. And so I need you to communicate what you're working on so that someone doesn't duplicate the effort. Good heavens, we don't have time to be duplicating work right now. I need you to communicate what you're working on so that things don't fall through the cracks, right? So that people understand what you're working on and when it'll be done, and perhaps knowing that things will take a little bit longer. And if you're not working on something that someone else needs or is expecting, if you communicate what you are working on, they will have the ability then to either shift your priorities or to step in and do the work that needs to be done if it's something that's higher priority. As you communicate what you're working on as an individual and as an individual contributor or a team member, be thinking about what you're struggling with and what's hard and where you're stuck, because there may be someone out there on your team who can help you get unstuck, who has the tools, who has the resources, who has the ideas to help you get unstuck and help you move forward on that. Communicate what you need, because again, someone on that call, someone in that team member may be able to help get you what it is that you need. If you are a leader at this point, I really invite you to think about, of course, communicating what you're working on, of course, communicating what the expectations are, of course, communicating the things that you are doing actively and how your team is connecting right now. I also need you to communicate about the decisions that are still underway. What do you not know? Sometimes when we don't get answers from those that that lead us, we play an unfortunate game of Mad Libs. And instead of just trusting or waiting for someone else to answer, we fill those voids, especially in a moment of crisis. We fill the unknown with the worst possible scenario. We fill in the blanks with horror stories, and we make up things that aren't necessarily true. And so as you're thinking about communication right now, I want you to communicate what decisions are you working on? What things are yet undecided? And then the follow-up to that is when can you say the next piece? Maybe this is, you're working on something and you're going to give them an update by tomorrow. Maybe you're working on something and you're not going to be able to give them an update by tomorrow, but surely by Monday. Communicate what you're working on and then when that next communication point is so that they are able to hear that. I think for all of us, we need to be communicating right now what our next communication point is, right? In this moment of crisis, in this uncertainty where things are moving so fast, we have to be able to know, when am I going to get to talk to you again? When will I get the next update from you? When will I get the next communication point from you? When will I hear that you're okay if I'm worried about you as an individual, right? So I invite you to communicate, whether you are leading others or working with others. I invite you to communicate, when is that next communication point? The other thing I want you to think about from a communication standpoint is I need you to communicate patiently. The reality is that communication will take longer now than it did when we sat right next to each other. Things will be harder. Things will be bumpier. You will find new technologies. You'll find new tools. You'll find shortcuts. We'll find a groove. It's going to be okay. But for the moment, we need to be patient. We need to be sure to test the technology. I was working with a client just this morning, and we're testing the technology of something that we're going to be delivering very, very shortly, where we had a change from a live delivery and in person. Because of the regulations right now, we can't meet in person. And so we're going to contribute, or we're going to have the whole training session virtually. And we're testing the technology to make sure that it works, to make sure that everybody's comfortable and we can be seamless. Be patient with that. This kind of thing is going to take extra time. It's going to take extra time to use the new communication channels. They won't all work the same way. There'll be bugs. Be patient if the person that you're trying to connect with, their system is slow, or they're not as used to using the virtual platforms perhaps as you are. Just be patient. Be patient with the tech and be patient with each other. I think it's going to be a bit before we find our new normal. And eventually we're going to communicate what new normal looks like. But for the moment, I invite you to communicate more, right? Communicate how you're feeling, communicate what you're working on, communicate that next communication point. And through it all, let's keep communicating patiently. At this point, I stop the recording and I open up the discussion for additional comments. The additional comments will be captured on our blog, and so you'll be able to read those there. Thanks so much for being part of this conversation.